Today is December 6th, the feast of St. Nicholas of Myra. I grew up in a Polish Roman Catholic household, and it was a big feast day for us. It was exciting as kids to hang out our stockings on the night of the 5th, and on the 6th, they'd be full of all sorts of goodies. Nicholas was the bishop of Myra in the early 300s, which is in modern-day Turkey. There's a lot of stories and legends attached to his life, but both the church in the East and the West hold Nicholas's life up as this icon of God's love at work in our midst. And some of the stories that are told about Nicholas really lift up the gift of anonymous love that Nicholas enfleshed. One such story involves a poor father in the diocese where Nicholas was serving as bishop. And this father was poor and he had 3 daughters, and because of his poverty, he wasn't able to afford a dowry for their weddings. And at that time and in that culture, if the women couldn't be married, they would likely be relegated to a life of prostitution. So as the story goes, 3 consecutive nights, Nicholas walked by the father's house and threw a bag of gold coins through the window, or down the chimney, which is where we start to see the connection between St. Nicholas and Santa Claus. Also that this father could provide a life for his daughters. Now, I'm glad times have changed a lot since the early 300s, even recognizing that a lot of change is still needed. So that kind of love doesn't necessarily have to happen today as much as it did in the early 300s. But it's an example of Nicholas holding up our deepest calling as Christians, which is simply to be and to give love, expecting nothing in return, not for accolades or for honor or for glory, but just to be and to give love, even and especially anonymously. And then that is a Holy Advent invitation for us all to pause and pray about today. Maybe reflecting how in our lives we've been sustained and lifted up, picked up by anonymous love. The random act of kindness of a stranger, how we've experienced that in our lives. Or maybe it's just how we come to appreciate a bit more deeply today that everyday constant patience and love of those closest to us that we so often take for granted. Maybe we can best celebrate then this feast of St. Nicholas by loving in the same way, today or throughout this Advent season, by doing some anonymous loving. Maybe that's giving a Secret Santa gift to a neighbor just because, or making an anonymous donation to a charity, or paying for somebody's coffee in the drive-thru who's behind us. All ways we find ourselves becoming instruments of Emmanuel, God with us, the one who loves us even and especially anonymously, even when we don't recognize it, and even if we don't always deserve it. Advent peace and blessings to you all.